Hey, this is Sean with the podcast Thrive Not Survive After Child Abuse. As you can see, at least if you follow it by watching me on YouTube or another channel, then you can actually see how I record this as well. So you can both listen and watch it. But a lot of people, a lot of you I know, you just listen to my podcast. So I'm going to describe a little bit where I am. I'm just in a park very close by to my house here in Allen, which is in the Dallas area, Texas. And usually I go here to do my workout, bike or run, and then do some stretching and some old-fashioned martial art things just for strength and stuff. It's not to talk about that. It's just also to a little bit tell you how I run that. So I try to do this daily, but I must unfortunately admit that I'm a kind of a pretty weather type of exercise guy, meaning that going outside to exercise, right? I think it's really good to always exercise outside, but if the weather is bad, then I tend not to do it. And for me, the weather is bad when it's definitely too cold or too wet, right? Today it's really nice weather. It's in the 70s. It probably drops about 20-25 degrees before we hit the evening. That's a little bit how it is in Texas. Anyhow, that's just what I wanted to say. If you watch this and you see this little wire here, don't worry about it. It's just I'm testing also a new microphone, so you can give me a little bit of a comment back if the sound is improved. As I just tried this little mic. It's not a commercial or something like that, but if you want to know something about it, then just find it. Right. Yesterday in the podcast and also on the place, I always do a double or a almost triple recording on Tuesdays and on Saturdays. I talked about our emotions, are they contagious? Right? Are they contagious? And that means like, I really mean contagious as the flu, or to be a little bit more, up to date, is something like coronavirus, right? So highly contagious type of diseases. The big ones, until we had corona were almost extinct from the world, like, measles and what have you not. Plague, were all these big, contagious type of diseases that were going around the world, in just a few centuries ago, that could wipe out whole level of population. Actually, last century, in the beginning of the century, first half of the century, we had the Spanish flu, which was also very devastating for human population, right? So. The coronavirus is starting to take its toll. 6.5 million deaths already around the world, so that's incredible, right? And so that's huge numbers that we have. I hope people take it serious, and there's enough said about coronavirus and that it's contagious. What you need to do, you need to keep distance from each other. You need to unfortunately avoid people who have it, right? Doesn't mean you cannot give any care or any other way of give them solace, but you need to actually try to isolate them, put them in quarantine, stuff like that. And the people who know that they have corona, even if it's a mild form, maybe you feel still very good to go outside, but you need to also behave very, very responsible and don't mingle with other people. And so on and so on. So one of my students, actually, she's a school nurse, and she had to change shift, and and although she said, all the measurements are so that we are not getting contaminated by the coronavirus, I don't want to take any risk, so I won't come to the dance studio for the next couple of weeks. I think that's responsible behavior, right? And dancing is a big passion of her, so it cost her personally something to do that, but her thought is more about other people first than about herself. Now, yesterday I did a talk about, is that so much different with emotions, right? Can emotions be contagious, and if they are, how to behave then. Now, first of all, let me give you immediately the answer to that question. Are emotions contagious? Yes, they are highly contagious, right? The stronger the emotions, the more contagious they actually are, right? It's hard to measure that, but you can actually research that, and it has been researched quite a bit. So we call it emotion contagion, right? You can actually measure it. You can measure yourself whether you are a little bit more open to get that. So that means actually, if you read those research, it's not only important for the data that we have, but it is also, you can see actually you could do something about it. Some people, like, you know, with other diseases, if your health is already not so strong, you are more likely to catch some diseases and some not. So the same thing is what you could say with if you are mentally a little bit more resilient, a little bit more stronger. It doesn't make you a better person, it's just what it is. Maybe you took really care of your mental health as you take care of your physical health, right? You are less likely to take over anyone else's emotion than when you don't, right? So it's actually really good to know, and it puts some responsibility on you too. Now, if it comes to mental health, there's a lot of taboo around that as well, right? So if you talk about physical health, immediately you get compassion around it, stuff like that. But do know that if you follow my coaching, that a lot of the physical issues that you have, probably you did something in your life that kind of caused that. I'm not saying it's your fault, right? Hear me well, right? So I know various people who are in the medical industry, and because of the work that they do, they put themselves at more risk to get diseases than other people. Does that make sense? Like now with the coronavirus. So I'm not saying they shouldn't do that. I'm just saying because of what they do, they are more likely to catch corona in this case than other people. So it's always an action, and there's a consequence of the action and the decision that you took. Right now, some things you just simply cannot avoid, or you can avoid them, but that means you make a very drastic decision, like maybe you're a medical doctor that can help coronavirus patients, but you don't want to because you don't want to put yourself at risk, right? Now, so those decisions, of course, are always very personal, right? I'm not saying that, but it's not very much different with your mental state of being. Not all of them, right? Some people could, you could have it because you were born with it, but a lot of things that are caused by things that you did in the past, or things that happened to you in the past. Does that make sense? So this podcast is about child abuse victims. So that happened to them. The children who were abused, like myself, we didn't do anything. Let's make sure that you understand that we didn't do anything to deserve that, or we did anything that caused the reason why we were abused. But the fact is that we were abused, and because something happened to in the past, we are actually now more open to taking over other people's emotion, at least for 80%. At least for 80% of the child abuse victims are very more likely, if someone is angry, that you take over the anger, but also that you express, for some people, smaller emotions, smaller triggers in a bigger way. So you could be either get quicker depressed, or you get either get quicker angry. You have a more tendency to be negatively impacted by the fears that you have. So these emotions are all a little bit more heightened, typically, not saying that's true for everyone, but typically by abuse victims. But there's always a responsibility on our side, since we know that could be in us a little bit more. I think we have to be a little bit more careful when we put ourselves, among people, when we are in a certain emotional state or mood that we have. And that doesn't mean that you have to solve everything, but you need to be a little bit more careful with the people that you surround yourself with. So the people who know about your past and about your history, those are the people that you might want to invite in the times that you have a little bit more difficult time. Just saying, hey man, I need to get some distraction, let's go out, and you are in this mood. You have to be very careful to make sure that you don't contaminate other people with your mood. Now, you might think that seems far-fetched, but it is absolutely not. You can actually also contaminate other people. If you can take over someone else's mood, and it could be positive or it could be negative, you can also contaminate other people with your mood. Does that make sense? So that's what I talked about yesterday. And since this podcast is about child abuse victims, and so I want to hone a little bit more into what's happening in not everyone, but it's about 80%. So that's a pretty big number actually, if you think about it, who have heightened expression of emotion. Now that's not the technical term, but I think you know what I mean with it. So if something happens to us, we typically get a little bit more quicker anger, or we get a quicker more depressed. We treat sometimes emotionally faster than anyone. So meaning we don't want to talk about it at all. So that happens a lot. Now that you know this, right, you probably want to say, hey, can I do something about it? Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the reasons, of course, why I published my book Broken Silence, right? Is, of course, first of all, acknowledging that what has overcome to you has overcome to you. That sounds for other people maybe like the most obvious thing to do, but it's not so easy to understand, right? So for a lot of people, like myself, we stay for a long time in denial to the things that have overcome us. Not to stay and linger in what happened to the past, but just more or less give it a place, right? So that's a big step forward. And once you do that, you need to learn a lot about these things, and everyone should do that, by the way, but maybe more so in this case, the people who have been abused in their childhood. We need to learn a lot about emotional states, right? Depending a little bit on what theory you follow, but there are about roughly 24 to 32 emotional states that we can be in, and to know all those nuances actually helps us. So to give you an example, and I put it down really extreme, so forgive me for that, but in the family that I grew up in, it felt like we only had two type of emotional states. We either were super happy and joyful and cheery and all that kind of stuff, or we became angry and almost violent in that way. So it's either one, right? So it's like we only know two. And strange as that is, if you don't know about the other one, you also cannot take them on, right? So knowing about the different types of emotion and learning how to express them, and it could be in the beginning just an artificial situation. Let me give you an example here. For instance, if you start to learn the art of dance, I'm a dance teacher, as you know, one of the things that I like to teach is about how to express your emotions. And it doesn't always have to be the emotions that you actually have. It could be the emotions that you just want to express because it's more suitable for the dance that you are going to perform. Does that make sense? But by exploring all these level of emotions, it has a huge impact on your personal life as well. Because of that, you learn the nuances of the different emotions, and also you start to understand what emotional expression is more appropriate to the situation that you are in. So I always give this little example. If I hit myself with a hammer on my thumb really hard while I'm, trying to hammer a nail in a piece of wood, and I would say, whoopsie daisy, people would probably think, wow, that didn't hurt so much. But if I say, whatever, it's kind of like almost appropriate to yell really loud when you hit yourself really hard with the hammer on your thumb. And the other way around is if I just spill a glass of water and I would immediately use the F word and start to yell and start to, stuff like that, and someone just tipped over a glass of water, that's not also an appropriate reaction to the situation you're in, right? And when you notice in yourself, and it's definitely not a judgment, when you notice in yourself that your emotional reactions are actually a little bit off to the situation that you're in, so then it's maybe really important for you to see, maybe I should read more about it, I should maybe seek out people who know more about it, I should probably do something about it so that you can learn it. And you don't have to go to therapy, trust me on this. Even just knowing about these different things are just extremely important already and help you fast forward. So let me give you another example. If you're a painter, right? If you're a painter and I say, you need to color that red, then the painter probably would say, like, what kind of red do you mean? And he has so many nuances of red that he can think of And actually there's so many nuances of red that they actually start to give it numbers instead of names, because we run out of numbers of names that we have, whether it's yeah. So fiery red, blood red, whatever red there is, right? So and the same thing is with emotions. There are so many. I mean, I told you already. We have maximum 30. I mean, that's the theory that I typically follow about 32 main categories of emotions. But there are, if you think about it, it's a scale, right? There are many more. We almost should give them numbers on a scale. But so the painter, because he knows so much about these nuances of the color red, when he looks at the world, he also sees more nuances of red, where the untrained eye, in this case, or the unknowledge guy, actually would not see all these nuances of red. Does that make a little bit sense? All right, so this is an important topic for me, but it's also hopefully an important topic for you guys. And I will continue this in another podcast. So this was Jean from the podcast Thrive and Not Survive After Child Abuse. I hope to hear you back tomorrow. I think tomorrow is episode 64, because I think this was episode 63. All right, bye-bye.